Police wouldn't be interviewed today, saying it's not for them to comment on adverts. But in the past they've admitted that the cuts won't be pain-free, but they say they're adopting a new policing model, allowing them to respond more quickly to persistent problems. The Home Office said it's irresponsible to play on people's fear. The police budget settlement will leave the force more than capable of cutting crime. Simon Jones, BBC South East Today, Maidstone.
Well, I'm joined now by Ian Poynton from the Kent Police Federation and Conservative MP for Rochester and Stroud, Mark Reckless, who sits on the Home Affairs Select Committee and the Kent Police Authority. Gentlemen, thank you both for being with us this evening. Ian Poynton, if I could turn to you first. The consequences of 500 fewer officers is rising crime. Cuts are criminal. You're scaremongering, aren't you?
Absolutely not. Neither are we being irresponsible. I can't see that it's irresponsible to tell the people of Kent the plain truth of the consequences of these cuts. Over the last 13 years, we saw record increases in the number of police officers and we saw crime fall. As we remove those officers, crime will rise.
Well, Mark Reckless, Mr. Poynton's just stating the obvious, isn't he? Fewer police officers around. Criminals will be pleased to hear that.
Well, I'm here in Medway, and there's 250,000 people here in Medway. And back 20 years ago, it wasn't unusual to have 10 burglaries in a day. Now it is rare to have more than 2 burglaries in a day for this very substantial area. And we've seen that reduction over 15, 20 years, and we've seen that at times when the number of officers have been rising and where the number of officers has been falling.
But if the Chief Constable himself, Ian Learmont, says fewer officers will reduce their effectiveness and efficiency and that crime may rise, that's got to be a concern, isn't it?
Well, I think you've taken a very short clip out of context of something Mr. Learmont said, I think, several months ago, and he said very clearly after that he actually saw the cut in grant as an opportunity to restructure the force to make it more efficient and more effective, and that's exactly what he did in Norfolk. He did fantastically well in taking officers out of silos, out of central specialist teams when there have been too many people drifting into those functions. We've been very heavy on the intelligence function in Kent, and what he's now doing is putting far more officers out in the neighbourhoods, and those officers will be taking on more responsibilities. But I think it's much better to have those neighbourhood officers taking the lead rather than leaving everything to
Ian Poynton, you're shaking your head at all of that. You don't see this as a good opportunity to become a leaner, fitter organisation?
Well, I think Mr. Reckless has just proved my point. He says we've seen crime fall, and yes, we have, and that's because the number of officers has steadily increased, and we're now going to take the number of officers back to the levels that they were in the year 2000. I think it's QED from Mark Reckless. And to compare what the Chief Constable did in Norfolk, just hang on a minute, to compare what the Chief Constable did in Norfolk, that was a process of investing in more officers at a time when he could do that. This is completely different here. Okay. This is about reorganising to reduce the number of officers, and we're going to see 500 less officers. I'd encourage Mr. Reckless to listen to the people on the tape.
To Mr. Poynton, one, he says that there is this steady increase in officers. I mean, that's just not the case. I mean, back in the sort of late 90s, we saw quite a fall in the number of police officers, and we've actually seen quite a fall over the last year or so. But over the whole period, we've seen a steady decline in burglary, despite the ups and downs in officer numbers. And I think that's an important point to recognise.
Both of you aren't going to agree on, gentlemen. We will have to leave it there for the moment, I'm afraid, but we do want to know what you think about this particular debate. Should the police budget have had greater protection from government spending cuts, or are the police no different from any other public service? Send your emails to the usual address, southeasttoday@bbc.co.uk, or get in touch via our Facebook site, and we'll hear some of your comments later in the programme.